In this section I'll look at font handling in CSS, starting off with changing the font face, the font family, changing size, font spacing, styling and so on. All these have example files to go with them in the section 5 directory of the downloadable archive, and here are the files, and I've preloaded them into the Notepad++ program editor. So let's take a look at the first one, font family, and here I've created two classes, class 1 and class 2, and applied class 1 to this level 2 heading here, and class 2 is applied to another level 2 heading below it. Now let's have a look at that in the browser. So here's the result of applying class 1, and here class 2 has been applied. Now let's look at exactly what was done. So we've used the font family, font-family rule, and rather than giving just a single font name to it, for example, it would be enough just to say font family Verdana, for example. But CSS is very flexible and allows you to specify a range of fonts, and what happens then is each font you specify, the browser then looks it up on the system that you're using, and if it can't find it, it then loads in the next font. So if Verdana doesn't exist on a particular operating system, then the Arial font will be loaded in, and if that isn't found, then Helvetica will be looked for, and if that isn't found, then a sans serif font will be loaded in, and that'll pretty much cover every eventuality that you can think of, so that your first choice of font will be chosen first, and then it'll fall back to other fonts that may not be quite exactly the font you want, but at least they'll be close, and eventually one a fallback that will be one of the main types of font, which will be sans serif, serif, monospace, script. And I think there's also fantasy as another basic type. So looking again at the code, you can see it has found Verdana, and Verdana has been shown, and this is a sans serif font. I'll just explain what that means. It's the word French, sans means without, and serif are the little fiddly bits. Let me enlarge this slightly so we can see what I'm talking about. Serifs are the little fiddly bits, just like this bit at the top of the F there, the bottom of the Y here, little fiddly bits at the S. See let me enlarge this even further. The little fiddly bits at the S, start and end, underneath the G for Georgia. Serif fonts are a bit fiddly, in other words. Whereas sans serif are much plainer and simpler fonts. So that's the difference between those two. Now I mentioned that there are a few different basic fallback types of font, and a range of font families that you can choose. So let's take a look at a web page that lists the basic ones that you'll generally be using. And here you can see there's Arial, Arial Black, Comic Sans MS, Courier New, Georgia, Impact, Lucida Console, Sans Unicode, Palatino, Tahoma, Times New Roman, Trebuchet, Verdana Symbol, Webdings, Wingdings, MS Sans Serif and MS Serif. Not all of these will be available on all systems, which is why you use the fallback system. And on this web page here you can see, for example, that Arial is similar to Helvetica, and it's a sans serif font, sans serif. Now Comic Sans is known as a cursive font, so you can always put cursive as your fallback if you want Comic as your favorite, as your preferred font, and it isn't on a system. Courier New is a monospace font, which means all letters are exactly the same width, so it's very good, for example, for lining up program code. Everything lines up neatly in columns. Georgia, that's a font normally you'll see on Macs, but you can find it on other computers, and that's a serif font. Impact is a sans serif. Lucida, another monospace. And then here we go with the symbol and the Webdings, which really don't have fallbacks because they are collections of strange characters. And on the right hand side here you can see how these fonts look when displayed in bold. So those are the fonts you can use and the fallbacks that you might want to choose when the particular font isn't available. Okay, so let's now look at font styling, and let's see some of the things that you can do with your font family once you've chosen it. So here I've created a few different styles called normal, italic, oblique, bold, overline, underline and strikeout. And for normal, I'm setting the font style to normal, the font weight to normal and the text decoration to none. So it's a basic standard normal font. For italic, the font style is set to italic, or for oblique, it's set to oblique. For bold, you have to modify the font weight attribute, so that's set to bold. Overline is achieved by using by modifying the text decoration attribute, as is underline or strikeout. So, and then down here we have a few paragraphs that apply each of these different rules. So let's have a look at that in the browser, and there you can see normal, italic, oblique, bold, overline, underline and strikeout. So that's how you achieve all those different textual effects. So now let's look at how you can change the sizing of a font. There are a number of ways you can do this. For example, in the previous section I discussed the different types of measurements such as points and pixels and so on. And here you can see that I'm using percentages for H1, H2, H3, H4, the four main levels of heading, and for the paragraph style I've simply chosen 12 point as the size here. And so here you can see each of these settings here are used in tags in the HTML below. So let's look at that in the browser, and there you have the heading 1 style, 2, 3 and 4 and the paragraph text. So that's how you can choose your own sizes of headings if you're not happy with the defaults, for example. And you can use this to change the size of any element or any CSS rule, any class, any ID and so on. Okay, now I'm going to show you something a little bit more interesting, which is font spacing, alignment and even transformation. So let's have a look at what we have here. Here's a rule that affects all paragraphs, setting the line height to 150%. So that means that the lines between each other as you go down the page are it's the equivalent of setting a 1.5 line height, for example, in the word processor. And then here the word spacing, we've set that to 10 pixels between each word and 1 pixel between each letter for the paragraph style. And then here I've put the justify class, so text align justify, an uppercase class, which is very interesting. What this will do is it'll take the entire text and transform it into uppercase for you. And the indent class, which I've created, which applies a 20 pixels indent to the first line of the element. So let's look at that in the browser. And what we have here is some text from Shakespeare. I'll show that to you down here. Here we are. There's the text down there. And the one part of the text has been modified inside a span, been set to uppercase. So let's take a look at that. There you are. That's the uppercase that's been automatically applied. If you look at the text here, it's mixed upper and lower, but just by applying that particular rule, it's all set to uppercase. And you can see here the line height. There you are. It's much greater line height than you'd expect, and the gaps between the words are wider than you'd expect, and the gaps between the letters may be different than you'd normally see. What I'm going to do is use a little trick I have done before and turn the style command into one called X style, which doesn't exist. So basically I'm removing those. And now let's look at this again now. What this will do is it's replaced all of those rules up here and displays them now just as if they were text, because X style means nothing to the browser. So it's just output that as text. But have a look here. This is how the text displays without any of those rules applied. what I'm going to do now is remove these modifications here. So we restore the 2-star commands and save that. What I'd like you to do is to watch this as I hit reload so that you can see the difference between the two. So here we go, reload, and there it is. The paragraph has been completely restyled exactly how we want it. And you can, for example, tweak, play around with this example file and see the different results that you'll get. And there you go.